Real or fake is the way that we're going to go about this. I kind of want to start with Minnesota because I think that they are the messiest team I've seen so far relative to
Nice way to put it.
expectations. Yeah, like Anthony Edwards is like calling out their effort, and then Karl Towns, for instance, called out Anthony Edwards' like diet a month after Anthony Edwards said that he wasn't going to eat out and like eat fast fried chicken or fried food anymore. And then like Anthony Edwards has said like he doesn't seem to have that burst. I don't know if he has a dunk yet this year as
He
of
has
their
two
first
now.
like
He didn't.
6 or 7 games.
Yeah, I think it was after the Suns game he got two. But yeah, before then he did not have any.
And you can kind of see it in the way that he seems to be operating right now. Yeah. I don't know what this team does well. They're 5-6. Like they're in a totally reasonable position right now. Rudy Gobert is obviously out in the health and safety protocols, but they're like in a not terrible position by any stretch. But do you feel like this team has a coherence when you watch them? I guess is what I would ask.
No, I think the first thing I would immediately say no. I think I was rewatching the Bucks game from prime time on Friday before we hopped on here. And I think so I just stopped and said to myself, like, what are they doing? Like on one hand, I do want to just like rein back and remember like this team looked pretty wayward the first, 15 games last year. So I do want to give them some leeway.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought coming into the year that it would take quite a while to integrate Gobert and make this look right. The issue for me is like, and I don't mean to like chalk it up too much to this, but it's straight up just been effort. Like watching them, I think stifling first action is fine, but their scramble defense has been pretty terrible. On offense, like it almost is reminiscent of watching the Saunders era in some of the shots that they'll take. Like it's not that there's anything wrong with early shot clock shots, but it's the shots you are taking. Like, okay, you're taking Taurean Prince is taking a pull up three with an overloaded corner and Gobert standing, 5 feet off the dunker spot in front of him. Like it's stuff like that. Like the spacing has been really rough. A lot of it's been just overall where the players are at. And yeah, I think it's been a pretty frustrating start just considering that those are the things that I didn't really like. I knew spacing and stuff and figuring that out would be weird, but effort was not something that I thought would have to be a question here. Like, and not to, I mean, it's been, I think, Cat and Ant, but that's what's been so frustrating. Like, yeah, I appreciate that you're providing accountability, but also like just fucking play harder, man. Like, I don't know. Like, it's frustrating. Just from like an analysis standpoint.
I actually, so I do want to acknowledge what you said at the top here in terms of them, A, starting the season slowly last year, and B, having a lot of new pieces to integrate, right? They just do at the end of the day. There's just a lot that they have to figure out schematically. I don't really know that they have a situation where all three of their main stars are on Rudy Gobert, Karl Towns, Anthony Edwards, where both sides of the court are totally working right now.
Yeah.
So with Gobert on the court, they have a 106 defensive rating. When he leaves the court, they're up to 116. When he's on the court, though, they have a 103 offensive rating and a 119 offensive rating without him on the court. So they haven't figured out how to integrate Gobert and Towns together yet on offense, but Karl Towns just can't defend without Rudy Gobert, like point blank. I hate what they're doing schematically when Rudy Gobert is off the court. They keep running Karl Towns and playing him like at the level of ball screen coverages. And what it does is it forces the corners to essentially come way in and try and tag with a very long tag toward Karl Towns' man or toward a guy in the dunker spot. And they just give up a ton of open threes, it feels like. The Wolves give up more wide open threes than any team in the NBA statistically right now. They give up about 24 of them per game. And this is a team that plays the fourth highest pace in the NBA. So you would expect them to just be a little bit higher because of pace of play. But it feels like they give up more open threes than anybody. It feels like they give up a ton of corner threes. It feels like they give up a lot of, wide open threes where, the guard hits the cross corner kick out to the corner, and then, guy in the corner whips it up to the wing for a wide open three that way. It feels like they give up a lot of wide open threes every single time you watch them without Rudy Gobert on the court. They need to figure out something different schematically with Karl Towns, because that just can't work. I don't think. I don't think they can make it work with him playing at the level of the screen with this level of Anthony Edwards athleticism and with this level of D'Angelo Russell athleticism. And that's kind of the other thing I want to get into. I don't think this team is overly athletic. That's actually my biggest problem. They're a team that's playing like super up and down, playing very high tempo, but is not all that athletic. Like this version of Anthony Edwards, yeah, he's like an above average athlete in the NBA, but he's not the top 3 athlete in the NBA that we've seen Anthony Edwards so far this season, at least, right? So I think he's going to work his way back into shape and get back into that echelon, but he's not that guy. D'Angelo Russell's obviously not a great athlete. Playing two bigs like Karl Towns and Rudy Gobert, you're going to be a little bit slow-footed out there in terms of running the court, in terms of being able to get back in transition defense, in terms of just having foot speed to cover a lot of different actions. Kyle Anderson, not a crazy athlete, obviously. Taurean Prince is not like a wild athlete. I feel like they go into games with like a fairly real athleticism deficit a lot of the time, and they don't really have like the wings and guards to cover for the lack of foot speed that Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns have right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And I think what's even more difficult too is just looking at their rebounding. Like they have not been good on the offensive glass. Like they've been fine. They've been a little bit below average, 18th per cleaning the glass, but then they're 23rd in defensive rebounding rate right now. And especially for a team that is going to be playing two bigs often, like they've been playing Naz Reid at the 4 and 5 too. And I honestly, I think there's been some good stuff seeing him out of the bench. Just the bench in general, I think, has been an upgrade, mainly because the starters have been so bad. But yeah, I agree with you. I think so often in watching this team this year, I felt like they play way too fast for what they're capable of doing, especially too, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. Like this team is just really poor decision-making wise. Like from the guards, like Ant right now, I don't want to say that he's regressed as a passer. I don't think he was awesome at that last year, but like he's not really looking at the roller very often. There's a lot of telegraph passes, and it's not just him; it's the entire roster.
I feel like what's happening is Ant can't put as much pressure on the paint, and he's not opening up passing angles as much as he did last year.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I mean, it's been very apparent. With Cat, I mean, I always think, and I think Cat is much better if you're they've done some really good things with high lows that I really like from Cat, but it's the Cat live dribble passes or Cat freelancing in the offense passes that I never feel very good about. Even D'Lo's decision making has been kind of rough too, and I think it's more in shot selection for him, and he can try and force some passes, but and I think especially with how cramped the offense has been, particularly with the starters, it's made it even worse. It just does not look good. It really does not look good. I feel like, it feels like there's 3 or 4 different things all going on at the same time. Like you mentioned, there's not really anything concrete that I feel awesome about them doing. So in some ways, it almost feels good that they're 5 and 6 compared to how we're talking about them. But at the same point, not great. Especially too, D'Lo had the really down shooting year last year, and I think there was just an expectation that he would shoot better from 3 this year. Granted, it's early, but 29.7% from 3 right now. Again, I think that's partially a symptom of the entire team. They have 2 guys shooting above average from 3 on volume right now. But that's not something that I think is just going to dramatically change overnight. So I don't know. How have you felt about the Gobert and D'Lo pick and roll? Because I feel like I haven't seen it as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, Not great. I feel
Yeah.
like I haven't seen that as much, but like I feel like they're not running. Look, I don't know what the numbers say. Maybe I'll pull that up as we're talking. I feel like they don't run a crazy amount of ball screens.
Yeah, it's felt like it's just a very like I really don't like how the offense looks. The screening has been really bad. Like even with Rudy, I think the screening's been kind of rough to start. Part of that again, like he screened for the same guys for 4 or 5 years. You're learning a new system and doing things differently. But the problem is it doesn't feel like there's a system right now. It just feels like guys taking shots. Um, and what's difficult too is this is not a team that I think should be much of a flow team because we're seeing kind of the results of that right now. So yeah, I'm in there with you. Like I almost want to see uh an attempt to really try and separate some of the starters into the bench unit instead of playing more of like a 4 bench players and a starter, which I think we've seen more of. Like maybe you build the bench around D'Lo and Gobert, kind of like what Quinn Snyder did with Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert last year and in the year prior. Just because I think they need to find some more answers with it. Like it just does not look very good right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Jazz are in the bottom third of the league in points derived out of, hitting the roll man in pick and roll situations. And they are bottom 7 in the league in points derived out of pick and roll situations with the ball handler. So essentially, they're like for a team that's 4th in pace, you would expect those numbers to be drastically higher.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So yeah, no, my inclination was right. Like it feels like they're not running a lot of ball screens, and they aren't running a ton of ball screens. The other thing that I do just like kind of want to bring up here is I had one more note here. They're giving up currently the 5th most transition points per game in the league. And this is a team that was super successful running last year. And right now they're playing at the 4th highest pace, and they're being outscored in transition at the moment. It's not by a big amount. It's by 0.3 points per game. But for a team that's going to run, that has this kind of talent level, that doesn't have this much athleticism, it feels strange to me that they're continuing down this road. I feel like they would probably be smart to slow it down a little bit more and just kind of roll that way. The other note that I had for you is, yeah, they're 5 and 6, but like, look at their wins.
Yeah.
So,
not a good schedule.
Yeah. They've beaten the Thunder twice. They've beaten the Spurs, the Lakers, and the Rockets. Like those are 5 of the 7 worst teams in the league. Like this is about to get harder for them. Like they have the Suns coming up tomorrow. They have the Grizzlies Friday. They have the Cavs Sunday. They get a bit of a respite when they go to Orlando next Wednesday, but like then they have the 76ers and Heat back to back. Like this gets harder for them here soon. So they need to figure out some answers like this week, kind of. Otherwise, we could see a bit of a difficult first 20 game stretch as opposed to a first 10 game stretch.
Yeah, and I think what's so difficult too is because some of the other teams we're going to talk about, like with how competitive, I mean, obviously the least competitive every year, but with how many teams, like it feels like 25, 26 teams right now are like pretty fully competing to be in the playoffs.
Yes.
And getting any kind of hole that you have to dig yourself out of is not the way you want to start the season. Like it just makes it that much harder down the stretch. I think you need some kind of padding, especially headed into like, all right, are you going to make some kind of move at the trade deadline? Because then you're expecting like, all right, maybe we have a slight drop off as we try and make some changes there. Like, yeah, I agree. They really need to find something here. One thing I did want to think though, how have you felt about Jaden McDaniels? Because I do think he's like the one starter that I know the shot has not been there, but he has figured out some things that I think have been good. Like the driving and finishing through contact is getting kind of real for me.
Yes.
Again, the shot not being there makes it harder to distinguish it. But I mean, on top of the defense as well, like he's one of the few guys who I look at on the team that has been consistently effort and whatnot. So I think that has been a positive thing. But again, like it's just finding the ways to make this all work is Chris Finch has a job in store for him right now.
Yeah, like with Jaden, it's like great defense and great finishing, but they need the shooting. Like his job this year, like the biggest swing skill for Jaden McDaniels this year, point blank, was he needs to knock down threes because we need to space the floor so that Rudy Gobert can dive to the rim, so that Karl Towns can post occasionally. That's the skill for Jaden McDaniels this year. Not to say he can't be effective without it, but like from a team perspective, they desperately need him to be good at that. And he hasn't been so far. The other thing I will note on the Timberwolves schedule is they've played 8 of their 11 games at home so far. This gets harder. Like this doesn't get easier for them. And this is a team that should be probably 8-3 right now with their schedule. Like you can expect loss. You can expect a loss, to Phoenix on the road. You can maybe expect a loss to Milwaukee at home, but like you should beat the Knicks at home.
Yeah.
You should beat
that
the
game
Spurs.
was disgusting.
Yeah, like you should beat the Spurs regardless, almost. I'll even accept losing to Utah at home, given the way Utah looks, and we'll get to them next maybe, because I find what they're doing fascinating. But like a home game against Utah, like I guarantee they were favored in that game, if only because we didn't know what Utah was at that point. But like they've probably been favored in 8 of their 11 games so far, if not more. So I think that they're actually like, even though it's 5-6 and things look okay in terms of record, they're behind the 8 ball, I think, from a schedule perspective right now.
Yeah, definitely. I'd imagine, I'm not like a huge betting person, but I would imagine that they have been one of the worst teams against the spread this year, just given how their year started off. The last thing I want to hit on too, that I think is going to be really interesting for them, they have kind of, and this sounds minor, but they've pretty much axed Bryn Forbes' minutes right now. It sounds small. There is not a movement shooter on this team, and I am worried about that as the season goes on. I think especially too, like I liked the Kyle Anderson pickup, but also it's really hard to make Kyle Anderson work with how this team looks right now. Even with the bench unit, like the shooting has been pretty blah, outside of Taurean Prince being on an absolute heater. So again, just it feels like they have to make some tweaks, maybe roster wise, or figuring some things out in the lineups that are going to be different. But one of the more fascinating teams to watch and try and figure out this year, because I just am not. I have no idea what they're going to look like in a month.
Yeah, I agree.